Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: Chinese hackers recently breached key software used by U.S. critical infrastructure. What are the impacts and how are top national security officials responding? A nuclear renaissance in the U.S. That's what President Trump is trying to bring with a slew of executive orders to boost the nuclear energy industry. How can it help the U.S. win the AI arms race with China?
We've got enough electricity to win the AI arms race with China. What we do in the next 5 years related to electricity is going to determine the next 50, because this is the first time in history where electricity can be translated into intelligence.
COVID-19 is back in the spotlight as a new variant emerges in China, now under close watch by the World Health Organization. Early reports trace its origin back to the country. And a message from the U.S. State Department after Malaysia arrested dozens of Falun Gong practitioners. Members of the faith group have faced brutal persecution inside China since 1999. And the arrests in Malaysia come ahead of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to the country. Chinese hackers finding back ends in U.S. infrastructure. According to a report from top cybersecurity company Cisco Talos, Chinese actors broke into key software used by critical infrastructure across the U.S. But the exploit they used to get in has now been fixed. The breached software is called Trimble City Works, and it's used by local governments and city departments in the U.S. to manage road repairs, permits, and utility services. The Chinese hackers took advantage of what's called a zero-day exploit. That's when hackers find a flaw no one knows about yet, giving them the upper hand before anyone can stop them. It's the kind of threat top security officials have been sounding alarms over. Last year, then FBI Director Christopher Wray raised concerns about cyber threats coming from China, especially when they target U.S. infrastructure.
We found persistent PRC access in our critical telecommunications, energy, water, and other infrastructure sectors. All of this with the goal of giving the Chinese government the ability to wait for just the right moment to deal a devastating blow.
And that warning may have been more than just hypothetical. The first signs of trouble started back in January. That's when a top cybersecurity team at Cisco Talos noticed suspicious activity linked to the Trimble City Works software flaw. By early February, the company behind the software, Trimble, released an update to fix the issue. They also warned that hackers were already trying to break into systems using the vulnerability. The U.S. government took this threat seriously. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency quickly flagged the exploit as dangerous and ordered federal agencies to update their systems immediately. The security agency then told organizations in critical sectors like water, energy, transportation, and communications to do the same. Flaws like this can open backdoors into the systems millions of Americans rely on every day. And in this case, investigators say Chinese hackers were behind the attacks, targeting the core of U.S. infrastructure. President Donald Trump signing a slew of new executive orders on Friday aimed at boosting America's energy dominance. Huge amounts of power are critical to winning the race with China for AI supremacy. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
And President Trump signing 4 executive orders on Friday, all aimed at boosting the nuclear energy industry in the U.S. Specifically, they seek to expedite the approval process for new reactors, cut red tape within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and encourage mining and enriching uranium in the U.S.
The idea being that we can grow American industry on the back of foreign purchasers who are interested in this sort of technology as well.
The ultimate goal is to enhance national security by making sure that the U.S. has enough electricity for not only defense projects, but also for America's AI arms race with communist China.
That we've got enough electricity to win the AI arms race with China. What we do in the next 5 years related to electricity is going to determine the next 50, because this is the first time in history where electricity can be translated into intelligence. And we need that intelligence for every aspect of our economy, but also for defense.
The U.S. was the first developer of nuclear power, and it still has the most nuclear power capacity in the world. But the energy source is currently growing the fastest in China. Senior administration officials told us on Friday that the EOs today will bring a nuclear renaissance in the U.S. And Trump, meanwhile, also threatening to impose a 25% tariff on Apple unless it makes its products in the U.S. He asked that other phone makers who have been exempt from recent tariffs might also face the new treatment.
It would be more. It would be also Samsung and anybody that makes that product. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. So anybody that makes that product, and that'll start on, I guess, the end of June.
And on Friday, President Trump says U.S. Steel will keep its headquarters in Pittsburgh as part of a $14 billion partnership with Japan-based Nippon Steel. And Trump says it will create 70,000 jobs and bring $14 billion to the U.S. economy, and that he will visit the steel plant next Friday for a major rally. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
COVID-19 is making headlines again. The World Health Organization has designated a new strain as a variant under monitoring. This as reports indicate a resurgence of the virus in mainland China. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
The WHO says the MB181 variant poses a low risk to public health at the global level. Current COVID-19 vaccines are expected to remain effective against this variant, both for symptomatic and severe disease. Although some countries have reported an increase in cases and hospitalizations, the WHO notes there's no evidence that MB181 causes more severe illness than other variants currently in circulation. The WHO defines a variant under monitoring as a COVID-19 strain that may require prioritized attention and monitoring. It's of lower concern than either a variant of interest or a variant of concern. The update comes amid a reported uptick in COVID-19 cases in China. Patients there have described a severe burning throat pain, what locals refer to as razor blade throat, likening the sensation to swallowing shattered glass. The director of the Infectious Diseases Department at a Beijing hospital said the resurgence of COVID-19 is expected to peak sometime late this month. China's Center for Disease Control and Prevention says the NB181 variant is now the dominant strain in the country. Since the pandemic began in 2020, the Chinese Communist Party has faced long-standing accusations of concealing data, particularly regarding the virus's death toll. COVID-19 first emerged in Wuhan, China in late 2019. In April, the Trump administration updated its COVID-19 website to reflect the theory, widely asserted early on, that the virus originated from a high-security virology lab in Wuhan. Meanwhile, the CDC's airport screening program has detected multiple cases of the NB181 variant in the U.S. Records show international travelers arriving in California, Washington, Virginia, and New York have tested positive. Other states, including Hawaii, Ohio, and Rhode Island, have also reported cases that are not linked to airport screenings. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The State Department is raising the alarm after Malaysia detains dozens of Falun Gong practitioners. The arrests came before and during a visit from Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
2 days before Xi's arrival in mid-April, police officers appeared at a private venue where nearly 80 Falun Gong practitioners had gathered for a routine study of spiritual texts. The officers demanded their IDs and forcibly detained them. Those arrested include a woman older than 80 and a 10-year-old child. The mass arrest marked the first of its kind in Malaysia. The State Department expressed concern about the reports. It called on the CCP to end its nearly 26-year campaign to eradicate Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It also demanded that China cease its attempts to pressure other governments to repress the peaceful meditation practice.
Falun Gong is based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The meditation practice has been the target of a Beijing-run persecution campaign for over 2 decades. Millions of practitioners have been thrown in jail and tortured. At least 4,000 have been killed. An unclear number have had their organs harvested by force for sale in China's underground organ transplant market. Could a new BRICS currency challenge the U.S. dollar? Disagreement is brewing among a growing number of BRICS nations. That's the bloc made up of 10 countries, including Russia, India, Brazil, and Iran. They're casting doubt on the group's plan to dethrone the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. But China, also a BRICS nation, wants to promote it. Here's more.
BRICS, a multilateral group of nations originally conformed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, added additional members in 2024 and 2025, countries like Iran and the United Arab Emirates. But the expansion of the multilateral group of nations has also created rifts ahead of their annual summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, this July. Member nations like Egypt and Ethiopia reject the group's intentions to reform the United Nations and expand the Security Council. And countries like Brazil have already said that they see no possibility that the BRICS single currency could displace the US dollar as world reserve currency, something that the Chinese Communist Party and Russia have openly promoted. President Trump has warned BRICS nations that they would face strong tariffs if they conspire to undermine the US dollar. Countries like Russia and the Chinese Communist Party have now opted to strengthen bilateral relations with allied nations. The latest example of that is the Chinese Communist Party hosting the Taliban-led Afghan foreign minister and the foreign minister of Pakistan this week in Beijing. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, how are Americans responding to President Trump's latest executive orders aimed at reducing regulations on nuclear power? NTD's Jack Bradley sat down with a panel to discuss the potential impact of these new policies.
I think this could be a boon for communities throughout the United States, and I would think that the Greens would love this because it would be a clean source of energy.
Find out more after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer to break down President Trump's latest executive orders. NTD's Jack Bradley spoke on Friday to Joshua Doss, Senior Research Manager at Hit Strategies, and Matt Klink, owner and president of Klink Campaigns.
President Trump signed an executive order aimed at boosting nuclear power by scaling back some environmental regulations. The president issued 4 orders total, including one that would require these nuclear reactor commission to approve these nuclear reactors within 18 months, much faster than what it would take several years normally. Joshua, what's your take on this move?
Yeah, look, first, thanks for having me on. Part of this action, from what I've read, is about investing in the research and understanding how we can use nuclear power to benefit ourselves. I'm not a climatologist or an environmental scientist, but I am a person that is open and willing to find out ways that we can, lower the energy prices for everyday Americans. My issue with this excursion is that, and Pew Research shows us this, I'm a pollster, so I got to pull out the polling data. The majority of Americans themselves favor solar and wind power initiatives over nuclear initiatives. Secondly, Donald Trump is actively cutting clean energy initiatives that are currently saving people money to do this, right? So look, I'm a fiscal conservative. My issue with conservative policies is I feel they rarely conserve. The U.S., yes, you said earlier, has the largest nuclear power plants, but only 3 reactors have been built since 1996, right? And the reason why is because they're very expensive and they take a very long time to get propped up. So I just don't believe anything that's coming out of the White House when it comes to these initiatives.
And Matt, how could this move potentially reshape the future of U.S. energy development?
Well, it's a smart move by Donald Trump. I mean, nuclear is clean, it's emissions free. The problem with solar and wind is that they're intermittent power sources, meaning that when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, they work. But that doesn't work in most parts of the country or at night. So this is a smart move by the president. If he can cut regulations and if we can get away from building the monstrous nuclear plants and start building smaller nuclear plants like a lot of private industry is doing in the United States, I think this could be a boon for communities throughout the United States. And I would think that the Greens would love this because it would be a clean source of energy. But again, the problem with the modern day Democratic Party is anything Trump does as Orange Man bad, so they instantly knee-jerk reaction and say that they're opposed. And I think that Trump just needs to keep rolling out common sense initiatives like this. And I think ultimately what our fellow guest said is that, the proof's in the pudding. If these things start coming online, great. If they take 15 years to happen, that says more about the regulatory problems in the U.S. than anything.
Well, President Trump today also demanded that Apple and other smartphone companies make their devices in the U.S. or face a 25% tariff. Matt, back to you. What is the president's push here? Like, what's behind this, and how do you respond to critics who may argue that producing the smartphones here in the U.S. may drive up costs and possibly face hiring challenges?
Well, a couple things. I mean, one, they're currently being made in China, and Tim Cook thought he was going to pull a fast one when he said that they were going to move production of the iPhone to India. And ultimately, Trump wants to make things again in the United States. So I know that Apple did announce under Joe Biden an investment in Wisconsin. I think that Trump wants, or I think it was with Foxconn. Trump wants to see more investment in the United States, and Apple is the proverbial big dog. And if they thought that they were going to go unscathed through Trump's pressure to bring more manufacturing back home, this is proof positive that that's not the case. And as to whether or not it's going to cost more, I mean, I'm curious by Apple's perspective what the profitability is on a per iPhone basis. So who knows? I mean, yeah, it would probably cost more, but if people are shelling out $1,000 for an iPhone, $1,100 is not going to be that much different. And if they're made in the United States, you get the benefit of American jobs as opposed to jobs in India or jobs in China.
Joshua, to you on this move on Apple by the president, is it justified to secure the supply chain? And as Treasury Secretary Bessent said this morning, quote, bring back precision manufacturing to the U.S.?
That's just not going to happen. I would love it if it happened. It's just not going to happen. Apple's supply chain analysts have already responded saying that it would be cheaper for them to actually just take the hits of the tariffs than it would be for them to move their gargantuan manufacturing apparatus back to America, right? So like, of course, and by the way, of course, it'd be cheaper for them to do that because they're going to pass that 25% tariff on to the American consumer, just like Amazon just did and Walmart just did, right? It's a very simple formula for them. If it costs more for them, it's going to cost more for you. So look, I like the idea of bringing jobs back. I want to re-domicile American manufacturing, but it's not going to happen. Also adding in the fact that 77% of the country thinks that we should have more manufacturing jobs, but only 18% of the country wants to work in manufacturing. So my question is, who won't work these jobs? I'm from the west side of Chicago. Everybody in the west side of Chicago got a pair of Jordans. Don't nobody want to make Jordans. Folks got iPhones. People don't want to make iPhones, right? So it just seems like a pipe dream. Also, while Trump is actively attempting to deport anyone who's brown and speaks Spanish, and we're sitting on a very low unemployment rate thanks to Joe Biden, and folks don't want to work these jobs. It's just not very believable, once again, coming from the White House.
All right. A lot to unpack in this next one. President Trump also announcing a partnership deal between U.S. Steel and Japan's Nippon Steel. He said that the deal will create at least 70,000 jobs and add $14 billion to the U.S. economy. Matt, how should we understand the impact of this deal? Can Nippon be trusted to maintain a long-term commitment to unionized American mills?
Well, I think a couple things are important here. One, I think that this issue became a hot button in the 2024 presidential contest. And then in January, the Biden presidency and the last days of the administration, they blocked the deal for national security concerns. We don't know yet what's in this partnership. And I think that's important. We did hear that U.S. Steel will continue to maintain its headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I know that the unions have already expressed concerns that Nippon Steel has been a pretty big violator and flooding the American market with cheap steel. But if it gives a lifeline to the industry, I mean, look, U.S. Steel could go out of business and then we lose twice. So I think that the proof ultimately is going to be in the pudding here. And if Nippon Steel injects money into U.S. Steel, they said it would be a $14 billion partnership if it creates jobs in Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the state's Democratic governor, supports the deal. I think that it's going to be a good thing. But if Nippon Steel is a bad partner, then I think that it's going to be very problematic. And ultimately, Donald Trump is not going to hold his tongue if he doesn't like what's ultimately occurring. So it appears to be a good thing. But again, time will tell.
Joshua, what's your take?
I mean, I share the opinion of my panelists here. I could definitely see the upside, but I just don't feel like we know enough about how these actors are going to. And another thing I'll say, it does feel like an age-old story of another American politician selling swaths of our manufacturing economy to a foreign country, something we've seen Republicans and Democrats do before. So, I don't have a ton of trust right now in this trade. I think that 15% of the United States total steel production going to Japan is a bad idea. And the United States, the U.S. Steelworkers Union, who represents a massive percentage of all U.S. steelworkers, also thinks that it's not that great of an idea. So it's more of a wait and see, I think, with this one.
Okay, let's pivot to our last topic here. It's the President Trump declaring BRICS is dead. BRICS includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It aims to reshape the global order by reducing reliance on the U.S. dollar. Joshua, given Vice President J.D. Vance's recent talks with India and President Trump's recent meeting with South Africa's leader, is this enough to counter BRICS' effort to replace the U.S. dollar?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think BRICS is dead. I think BRICS is expanding from all that I know. And I think that that's actually that's a very important thing for us to acknowledge. And I don't think these actions are enough. I think that these expansions are also very symbolic of where the world is moving on global populism, right? And I think it even more so puts pressure on us to have our allies in our corner, which is something that President Trump has kind of been dropping the ball on, right? Something I've been saying recently here is the only thing worse than going to war with your allies is going to war without them. And as folks are emerging as real superpowers, global superpowers, we definitely need to do a lot more than that. And just the declaring that BRICS is dead to secure what we need to secure here in America.
Matt, over to you. Your thoughts on the threat of BRICS and what the implications could be if it successfully launched its own currency.
Well, look, I think that launching their own currency is a pipe dream for BRICS. I think that they may want to replace the U.S. dollar, but it is still the dominant world currency, in part because the U.S. is the most stable market in the world. And if anyone in the world is foolish enough to think that doing business with Brazil or China or India or Russia or South Africa is more stable than doing business with the United States, then they're pretty stupid to begin with. So we need to take this seriously. I think we can all agree the U.S. doesn't get a vote as to whether the BRICS are dead or not. But that being said, we do need to make sure we have our economic house in order. And I think that we're well on that way after 4 years of the disastrous Biden-Harris administration. But again, ever vigilant, and nobody cares about what happened in the past. Everybody cares about what's going to happen in the future.
All right. Matt Klink, Joshua Doss, thank you both very much for coming on. Really appreciate your perspectives.
Thanks a million.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.